Pay attention because this news completely changes the scenario for the Golden State Warriors. If you're a fan, you've already felt the frustration of recent decisions, the feeling that the team was fighting, but was always a step late. Today that changes. The Warriors entered into a true behind-the-scenes war, faced heavy competition, and won. It's not just another name arriving, it's a piece that solves a real problem for the cast, fits into the system, and gives hope back to those who were already tired of empty promises. Stay with me until the end, because when you understand the impact of this movement, you will realize that nothing will be the same again. Before moving on, let me ask you something quick and direct, because it makes all the difference. If you follow the Warriors, if you live every game, every decision, and every behind the scenes of this team, leave a like now and subscribe to the channel. This really helps the content reach more fans and ensures that you don't miss any important updates. Activate the bell to receive everything firsthand because news like this doesn't wait. Once that's done, stay with me until the end of the video, because the details that come now explain exactly why this behind-the-scenes victory could change the course of the season. When I watched NBA Today on ESPN, I confess that something became very clear from the first minutes. The climate around the Golden State Warriors changed. It is no longer that lukewarm feeling of distant speculation, of empty rumors that arise and disappear without consequence. This time, what appeared there was a much deeper, more connected, and, above all, realistic portrait of what is happening behind the scenes of the league, especially involving the Warriors, and what could be one of the most decisive moments of this final Stephen Curry era. Analysts weren't just throwing names on the table. They built a narrative that linked every possibility, every rumor, and every obstacle, showing how the decisions of one franchise directly affect the others. When you hear this kind of well-done analysis, you begin to realize that the NBA trade market doesn't work in isolation. It's almost like a chessboard, where one move completely changes the value and direction of all the others. And that's exactly what caught my attention, because in just a few minutes, they went through names ranging from Michael Porter Jr., Jaren Jackson Jr., to something that, months ago, would have seemed unthinkable, the possibility of Ja Morant ending up in the Golden State, not as a delusion, but as a logical consequence of a specific scenario that is now taking shape. When the subject came to Michael Porter Jr., it became clear that this is the hottest name linked to the Warriors in recent weeks. It's not something new, but the difference now is the tone of certainty. The information that the switch is practically inevitable didn't come from just anywhere. It came from people with a history, with experience in front offices and direct access to the league's cogs. This changes everything. What is emerging is a scenario in which the Brooklyn Nets have already accepted that Porter is no longer part of the future of the franchise. And when reports emerge that there is even a replacement skeleton assembled, with final details being adjusted, it becomes difficult to ignore the signs. Even more so when this coincides with how Jonathan Kuminga simply disappeared from the Warriors' rotation. And here it is, worth an important pause. Because a lot of people look at it just as a technical decision, but it's not. When a young, talented, and athletic player like Kuminga suddenly stops playing, it rarely happens for no reason. The message the analysts left was direct. Kuminga is not out by chance. He is out because something has already been decided internally. The package under discussion is not small. It involves Kuminga, Buddy Hield, Moses Moody, and a first-round pick. The point of tension, the one that really divides opinions, is whether or not it's worth adding a second first-round pick to close the deal for Porter Jr. And this is where the most important factor in this whole conversation comes in: Stephen Curry. When you look at the season Curry is having at age 37, there's no way to pretend this is normal. Not only does he continue to be dominant offensively, he has expanded his game even further. He is more efficient in the mid-range, goes to the free throw line more, competes better defensively, and statistically is experiencing one of the most complete phases of his career. Given this, the question stops being just about market value and becomes about time. How long is there left to max out this version of Curry? Because windows like this don't repeat themselves. And in the analyst's view, if adding a second first-round pick means significantly increasing the chances of competing now, then that's a price that needs to be paid. But the debate does not stop there. Because while one part of the organization seems inclined to act, another still stares at a name that haunts the Bastidores dos Warriors for years: Giannis Antetokounmpo. The idea of waiting for Giannis is not new. She has been following Joe Lacob long enough to have already shaped several important decisions. The problem is that waiting has a cost, and that cost may be losing real opportunities in the present in exchange for a possibility that may never materialize. When you coldly analyze the market, it becomes clear that the Golden State does not have the most attractive package if Milwaukee decides to open a broad dispute. Other franchises have more assets, more choices, and more flexibility. The only way this plan could work would be if Giannis, of his own volition, drastically reduced his list of destinations. And even in this scenario, there would still be obstacles. New York doesn't have that many choices. Miami would hardly give up Bam Adebayo. And, in this specific context, Golden State could indeed emerge as the most viable path. But this is an extremely risky bet. That's why the analyst was so harsh in classifying this wait as something dangerous. Holding on to assets waiting for a player who may never become available could mean missing the exact moment when the franchise still has Curry playing at an MVP level. And Behave Yourself Jr. is not enough to justify this total sacrifice of assets. Then another name appears that begins to gain strength in a silent but constant way: Jaren Jackson Jr. What's being floated behind the scenes is that if Memphis really does decide to negotiate now, it might make more sense to initiate a full reset with no half measures. Jaren Jackson is a player who divides opinions, but his defensive impact is undeniable. Former Defender of the Year, elite rim protector, and with the ability to space the court, he offers something that the Warriors simply don't have today: a consistent physical presence in the paint without completely sacrificing offense. It's true that his absence problems are known and will probably never go away. But it's also true that context matters. Playing alongside Curry, Draymond, and Jimmy Butler would completely change the type of pitches he selects and the way he is used offensively. In a more organized system, with a controlled pace and constant reading, there is a real belief that your efficiency would increase considerably. Defensively, his mere presence would resolve several structural weaknesses in the squad. A rotation with size, rim protection, and defensive versatility comes into existence. The cost, of course, would be high. It would involve Kuminga, Moody, Will Richard, and 2 first-round picks. And letting go of Will Richard is not something simple. He is young, cheap, productive, and already demonstrates the level of starter. Losing this type of player hurts, especially for a franchise that has always valued internal development. But again, the discussion comes back to the same point: change. The general feeling is that something needs to happen, that keeping everything as it is no longer a comfortable option. And then we come to the most controversial name of all, Ja Morant, officially on the market, with a drastically reduced value due to injuries, off-court problems, and uncertainty. And that's exactly what makes this possibility so intriguing. From a purely technical point of view, there is no discussion about talent. Morant is an explosive playmaker, one of the most athletic players in the league, and someone capable of completely changing a team's offensive dynamic. For Curry, it would mean immediate relief: fewer double appointments, less constant creative responsibility, and more efficiency in decisive moments. Additionally, Golden State believes, or at least wants to believe, that its organizational culture can offer something that other franchises may not: structure, stability, leadership, an environment capable of bringing out the best in Morant and, at the same time, protecting the group from its excesses. The most seductive aspect of this possibility is the so-called buy low. Acquiring talent at this level without handing over premium assets is extremely rare in the NBA. And, from what is said, the return per Morant will be surprisingly low. Other teams appear interested, but with clear limitations. Toronto doesn't have the necessary spacing. Clippers are going through a phase of indecision. Miami is always around, but it would have to give up important names. Sacrament appears as a curious destination, perhaps even logical, but nothing is defined. Finally, there is still the least expected, but no less interesting card: the Los Angeles Lakers. Two franchises that have historically avoided negotiating with each other, but now find themselves under pressure due to different circumstances. For the Lakers, Kuminga would be a project for the future. For the Warriors, names like Rui Hachimura, Dalton Knecht, or even Jared Vanderbilt bring specific solutions, whether in size, shooting, or defense. None of these options are perfect. They all involve risks. But this, in the end, sums up exactly the Warriors' moment. Does not exist more safe choice. There is only the decision between acting now or watching this window slowly close. What was most impressive in this entire analysis was not the number of names, but the honesty with which the risks were exposed. There was no selling of illusions. There was clarity. Each scenario came with its costs, limits, and consequences. And that's why the final question is inevitable. Do you bet on the present and maximize Stephen Curry now, even if it costs you? Or do you keep waiting for a future that may never come? This decision does not just define a trade deadline. It defines the final course of an entire era of Golden State Warriors. And that is exactly why this moment is not just another exchange window. It's a breaking point. The kind of decision that separates franchises trying to stay relevant from those that truly understand when the story demands courage. The Golden State Warriors arrived at that rare moment when standing still is, in practice, going backwards. Each name mentioned, each scenario analyzed, always leads to the same place. Stephen Curry's time is not infinite, and each choice made now will echo for years. If you want to follow everything that really matters, understand every movement before it becomes a headline, and see beyond the superficial noise, stay with me. In the pinned comment is the Golden State Warriors News Today playlist, where I bring together all the updates, in-depth analyses, and behind-the-scenes that help put together the complete puzzle of this decisive moment. Click there, dive into the playlist, and keep following, because the next few days could redefine the future of the Warriors, and you won't want to miss out.